First, Paulo is very generous always when he talks about my book, which is substantially inspired by his book. I should say. I didn't kind of go rogue. This is really his book. But there are a couple of things that he said that I want to pick up on just really quickly. And one of them is that, specifically to do with the title and to do with those words in the title, I wrote a sort of quite a long, I think probably overcomplicated afterword for the English translation, in which one of the things I talked about was how particular every writer's, I mean, this is kind of obvious, I guess, but every writer's use of their own language is. And one of the things that was really striking, and I only discovered this quite late, was that the use of mahoy amarelo in the particular way that Paulo refers to it is not a generic thing. It's not a national or even a regional thing. It's a very particular thing to his family and the way that his father uses these words to refer to him and his brother. And so there's something about the incredible particularity of the way in which language is used particularity to a kind of, literally only in this one house, which is different from the guy who lives next door and the people who live across the street. The other thing was something Paulo said about the difficulty in Brazil of dealing with what he described as a tabooed subject, which he said is much easier to see in other places. And I think that's true insofar as I think most places are really, really good at seeing and probably talking about racism when it's happening in other places. I think most places, certainly the UK, finds it very easy to talk about racism in Brazil and in other places and not here. I think there is an issue of this kind of blind spot that you can see it and talk about in other places. And what's really interesting about this book as a result is the kind of conversations that are happening, I think, in Brazil as a result of the visibility of the book in English. And certainly here is that it becomes a way of looking at something. Paulo talked about this sort of mirror, these blind spots we have about our own societies, the myths we have, the kind of historical lies which we tell ourselves, are things that are much easier to deal with when they're happening somewhere else. And so the conversation about race and racism and historic, systematic, structural racism in Brazil is a thing that's much easier it's a conversation that's much easier to have in other places. But it then becomes something which Paulo and I have talked about, which is one of the aspects of Brazil's kind of myth of racial, harmony and this kind of glorious rainbow nation where there is no racism, is not just to do with the way in which people are able or unable to have a conversation in Brazil. It's also about how the country is sold internationally. It's about how the country is presented to, whether it's readers or potential tourists or whatever it may be around the world. And so actually one of the things, again, that this book, I hope is allowing people to do is have a conversation that needs to happen not just in the one place, but in all the places where this sort of distorted view is being propagated.